Well, I bet it's very hot in Chennai now. I remember being in Tiruvannamalai in April and it was so hot.
Not yet very hot.
Oh, not yet very hot. It's the hottest I've ever experienced in Tiruvannamalai. I think it was in April.
You had been here, is it?
In April I was in Tiruvannamalai and the dry heat, I'd never experienced anything that hot. It almost felt like it burnt as you breathed in.
Which year was it?
In Tiruvannamalai. Oh, which year? Maybe 2011 or 12 or 10.
How many times were you here?
Oh, I've been here many times, like 8 or 9 times. But this one particular year in April was so hot.
But was it Tiruvannamalai you have been 8 or 9 times?
Yeah.
What was the reason which drew you to Tiruvannamalai? Because Bombay would have been Ramesh.
Yeah, I think it was just to visit friends at first, because everyone was going there because of Ramana Maharshi's ashram, and then I just liked it, sort of. I mean, I also didn't like it as well. It's more comfortable in Mumbai.
People say, I mean, it has got a certain vibration. Is it so? Did you, I mean...
I don't know, but I liked it. There was something I liked about it, and I liked the countryside and the nature. When I used to go, you used to be able to walk on the mountain and around it, but I think they've stopped that now.
No, they allow that.
They've allowed it again?
Yeah, they still allow that.
And there's something I love about India as well, but also it's very different for a white woman India.
What is it that you like about India?
Well, it's so different. And I like the way that a lot of life is outside. I like it the way that people stand around the chai bars, and there's a lot of activity on the streets. Western societies aren't so much like that anymore. I like all the colours and the life. Like there's a lot of life happening there, like a lot of human life happening there. But there's also some real cruel, I've seen the most cruelest and saddest things in India as well. And poverty, like really sad, cruel things as well. It's like the best of both worlds. There's so much beauty and nature and fun and life and happiness, and then there's also a real sad side as well with the poverty.
So what would be your advice?
Yes.
What would be your advice? About life.
About life. Well, it depends on the person I'm speaking to, but if I was speaking to a seeker, my advice would be to listen to non-duality. It's the most beautifully profound subject there is. But not listen intellectually, listen because there's a love for it. If it's intellectual, it just becomes a new concept. I mean, because the heart responds to it. Almost like the way that you responded when you were younger to your lover or something. Like there's a response on the heart level.
Meaning emotionally?
Yeah, a sensation of love, yeah. Even though in the end that love stops being personal, but it's kind of like that's the way you first start truly listening to it, is through loving it. But it's not, then eventually it stops being you loving it, and then all that's left is love. But at first you hear it, and then you feel like you love it. Because you hear the truth, you hear non-duality being spoken, and then it feels like a love for it, or it feels like something, an energy going towards it. But really there's nobody in here and there's nothing out there. What's happening when non-duality is being spoken truly is that it's being reminded of that freedom, that boundlessness, but it starts by as if you love it. And it's the same when you love art, or when you love music, or when you love your lover. You think it's them, but actually it's a reflection and reminding you of the wholeness of God. But you then think in your mind it's because of that lover, it's because of the art, and then the person tries to contain it and own it. And love happens because there is no boundaries in that which is hearing or looking at. Like, love is boundaryless. The only way love can be experienced is when everything begins to crumble. Like, true love is when it begins to crumble, the someone loving. You see, when you meet your lover, that woman or man that you just overwhelmed by, you completely forget yourself. When you hear the perfect piece of music, you forget yourself, and that's why it's called love, because there's no you anymore. There's no boundary on anything. But then the seeker comes back and says, I'm going to own that, I'm going to become a musician, I'm going to marry that woman, and then it kills it. It kills that beauty that it had by trying to own it. And then it always gets into this cycle of that which it loves, it strangles and tries to own.
Yes?
I was just looking at Khaleesi to make sure she's not off killing the owner's cat.
So in your talks, you talk, you give, like verbal communication.
And the verbal's got like a certain part to it, like the explaining intellectually of non-duality. But the most important bit, particularly with me as a speaker, is the resonance of that love. Like that remembering, that resonance of the love. I can explain it to an extent intellectually, but there's most probably other non-duality speakers that can do a better job explaining it intellectually. The most important part is that love that's being revealed, that stillness that's being revealed.
So you speak to us verbally, and through words you tell us to understand it intellectually, and then drop it, is it?
Well, no,
like
understanding it intellectually is good for the intellect to understand it intellectually. But the true message is the resonance with that love, which has got nothing to do with the intellect. But understanding it intellectually has a part, like the mind understanding it has a little part to it, but it's not very important. The most important part is that remembering that love, like you're listening to me speak, and there's a moment where, and it feels like on the tip of your tongue. That's the most important part.
So what is this love you're talking about?
The
love that we know of is usually it's
subject object.
It's the human love.
Yeah.
Subject of to a human being, to money, to power, blah blah blah.
This is
the love that you're talking.
This love is pure beingness. It's beingness. It's what makes up everything. And beingness is never found anywhere. So it's not a feeling, a sensation, a thought. It's pure and it's empty. And then it's everything. And it's always been there. It's always been beingness. Your emotions, your thoughts, your sensations have changed. And when waking up happens, it's like that beingness stops being hidden and stops being in the background. And it pierces through. And then all that's left is intimacy, is this love. And that's what always was everything. And that love cannot contain anything. Beingness cannot own anything. It is everything. It cannot hold on to anything. It is everything.
Is that love equated with happiness and bliss and joy
and ecstasy? The effect in the body is often when that happens to no one, but when that body stops identifying being someone, the effect in the body is normally more happiness, more joy, more peace. But it's not.
But it is not.
But it isn't that. That's the effect. That's the side effect in the body. I can't guarantee that. I've met many people that claim to have had no self and they don't always seem that happy, so I can't guarantee that. But what happened here was the effect in the body was a lot more relaxation, a lot more happiness, a lot more joy. But I don't know if other people can see that. Like, I don't know if that comes across to other people.
During awakening, is it that your emotions get skyrocketing? For example, if you get angry, you really blow your top, or is that the opposite of awakening?
No, often that does happen in awakening. The emotions become more intense. They become more intense in awakening.
It is scary.
Yeah, because you've got less filters. You see, when you were young, when the identity started, you were then told by your parents not to have emotions, because when you have an emotion, you're not such a good worker. You see, if you suddenly have an anger tantrum for an hour, it's painful for your parents, and you're not so good at doing things. If you can control your emotions, then you're much better at working. And that's what our society is geared towards. Our current society, even in India or in the UK, is geared towards making a workforce. My society is totally based around the idea of being educated and then going into the working system. It does.
So in their way,
Huh?
yeah.
And so what then, if you want to train a society in doing that, you have to teach them to not have emotions and feelings, because the emotions and feelings will disrupt the workforce. You can't be working as a computer programmer and then suddenly start crying. It's inappropriate to cry at work. So then when awakening happens, often that lid which has been holding down all the emotions begins to thin, and then all the emotions come up, and the person, even though the person is still separate, it stops caring what the neighbor thinks. It stops caring what people think about it. It stops caring about whether it'll be fired so much. And so all the emotions come to the surface. There's not such a whole thing on them saying, if you do this, well, these bad things will happen. And so with this idea that these bad things won't happen, then they come up like a volcano. There's less repressing them.
So can we say that you become more childlike?
Yes, more childlike. I found
More
what
animal.
happened. I found though what happened though. Pardon?
Animal-like.
Yeah.
Child and animals are together, no?
They're,
Something like that?
yeah. But I found what happened after Bali is that before that my emotions had been coming up and and then after Bali there seemed to be then after that a relaxing of the traumas in this body, so relaxing of a lot of the conditions of this body. So say a fear around a particular thing, it just began to relax over time. So the intensity of responses to things all began to relax. Even though when I read something sad or I see something beautiful, I still might start crying. And if I get angry, there might be shouting. Everything relaxed a lot more.
Now do you get angry?
Huh?
Now do you get angry?
I do get angry, yes.
Like a volcano?
Not much, no, not that big. When before Bali, it was big.
Before Bali?
Yeah, big like a volcano, like bah! But now,
Chilled out.
not really, no, not much. I mean, sometimes with me and Paul, when we wrote this script together, he wasn't very good at taking my advice, and I was the more experienced with one. And so sometimes he was good at taking my advice, but sometimes he wasn't so good. And it wasn't in his language either, so I would snap at him, but I don't know if I'd really get angry. It'd be like, ugh, like a snapping. Or and sometimes with Khaleesi I shout, but that's more not out of anger, it's more because she is gonna do something that will get me in a lot of trouble. I'm like,
But
no,
before Bali,
Khaleesi! Huh?
Before Bali.
Before Bali, I had big emotions, like lots of anger came up, anger towards God, anger towards my partner, crying, sadness. Then after Bali, that all relaxed. But I do notice that any left traumas in the body get challenged and relaxed. Like they.
How do you strike a balance living in a society where you are like a soldier? That's what some of the masters have said. No, this society treats you like a soldier. It's like left, right, front, forward, march, and fire. Yeah. That's what the society wants. But then in awakening, you turn more childlike. You become like you're living in two worlds.
Yeah.
It's kind of challenging. And
it takes immense amount of strength. Immense amount of strength, but it's not a personal thing. You don't have to worry. It's not Ilangho strength, but the strength will come, because what you've got to do is you've got to step away from the crowd, and you've got to be disliked. But funny enough, actually, then you'll find that people actually begin to really love you as well. The more that you become authentically Ilangho rather than trying to be Ilangho, people will love that innocence as well. But it does take strength, because people will really point their fingers at you, and I mean, if you look up saints in the past, they get killed, like for stepping away from the crowd. It's a huge thing, and it really disturbs people around you, because they're used to you being a certain way. But every time the emotion comes up and the fear comes up, you just go back to the emotion. You don't let it haunt you. So the emotion of lack comes up, that you're not enough and that everyone's going to hate you, and you just see that it's coming from emotion. It's not actually coming from them hating you. It's because you have that emotion. So you just go back and you let that emotion come out, like, I'm not enough, no one will love me, everyone's going to hate me. You don't let that emotion threaten you, because it's the emotion that threatens you, not them disliking you. And the same with the fear.
So you have been frequently telling about the emotion of lack.
Yeah.
And I was telling you, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's not coming to my surface, but my primary emotion is fear.
Oh yeah. Well, some will have more than others.
What is the relationship between fear and lack? Because I keep looking at, and probably because things are happening well now, maybe for a couple of years or something, this fear of lack is not coming. But the fear of, for example, there is a situation professionally, you just blow a top and get things done. Now you start thinking, maybe I shouldn't have done this, like what will happen. But then what's happening now is I don't carry forward that to the next session.
Yeah.
Earlier, that used to keep on,
but
come on to the
you could even interpret that both ways. You could interpret that one as fear or lack, because what if I'd done it differently could also be lack.
What is the connection? What is the connection between fear and lack?
Because that sense that you could have done it differently implies that you feel in some way you've done something wrong, which comes from lack, actually. That in some way there is something wrong with you. But it manifests as the sensation and the feeling of fear. But you could, in a way, you could see that lack and fear are very similar in a lot of ways.
Then what do? Just be with it.
Well, my advice, although there's not really someone doing it, but when those emotions come on, you just stay with the emotion. So you just take a moment when everyone goes out of the room and you just acknowledge what you feel. Rather than thinking it's because of the situation and because of what's happened, you just acknowledge, I feel lack, I feel not enough. That it's the feeling that's the problem, not the actual situation. It's actually the feeling that comes from separation. As soon as you feel separate, it interprets it in fear or lack.
And the feeling is involuntary. It's not within your control.
No, and it's not really under your control to acknowledge it. But like I could say to you, pass me the salt. That robot's interactive and it can pass the salt. So just stay with the feelings. And it's not about destination. It's not about getting somewhere. But it's the acknowledgement that nothing in the world can hurt you. Nothing. There's nothing that can hurt you. What hurts you is separation, and then the two primary emotions of fear or lack that come from it. And then they are never acknowledged, but what's acknowledged on the surface is anxiety and trying to fix it, and the obsession with thoughts. And so in the acknowledgement, in them coming to the surface, in them being conscious, then it means that there won't be such a strong energy acting out all the time, trying to get validation from the flow. So that means those emotions won't grow so strong. They're allowed to be as they are and come up and pass through. But this isn't, that part of me explaining this bit about the emotions isn't about getting to enlightenment. Forget getting to enlightenment. That's not something about you, but that's what we're talking about. But that's about the love. Listen to non-duality for the love, and enlightenment, that happens, and awakening, that happens. That's it. But this side will balance the person more and stop the person being so neurotic and suffering so much, because it won't be following out. It's like giving a treat to the dog every time it has fear. If you give a treat to the dog every time it has fear, it will encourage the emotion of fear. And that's what's happened in the human. It's constantly given a treat for lack and fear. Society has always said, yes, you're not enough, and yes, you've got to be scared of the future. So you've constantly been given cookies. So those emotions have been encouraged. Rather than joy and bliss and spontaneity, the two primary things that have been encouraged is lack and fear.
Excuse me, what did you say? You give what to the dog? Treat.
Treat. Every time it experiences fear, you're encouraging the sensation of fear. And in humanity, your parents have patted you on the head for feeling fear. They don't know it, but they've said, yes, you've got to be afraid for the future. Yes, you've got to work for the future. Yes, you've got to find love in the future. Yes, you've got to find a wife, you've got to have kids. They've always encouraged time. And so the mind's got obsessed with it.
No, excuse me, but generally parents say when suppose you're scared of the darkness when you're a child.
Yeah.
They say don't fear the darkness. That's what we say. Overcome your fears.
They might say that, but they encourage it by telling you that you've got to work hard at school in order to be successful when you're older. That is totally based on fear.
Okay, another question now directly to Lisa.
Yeah, or directly to Lisa.
Yeah. Because I was asking about myself all this while. We acknowledge this is a robotic cosmos. The kaleidoscope of forms happening is automatic.
Yeah.
How come Lisa Cairns, who's enlightened, quote unquote, when she writes a script with Paul, gets angry and snaps with Paul when she knows it is an automatic script?
Oh, just because she does that. She doesn't, because you think that in some way it's Lisa that got enlightened. It's not, I'm not anymore a solid person that's going from moment to moment. There is just response happening in every moment. So in that moment, Paul was saying this was better, and I was like, no, this is better, this is better, this is better, this is how you do it, this is how you do it. And then finally it was like, shut up, this is how you do it. Like, but it's not like I think of myself as this is enlightenment or this isn't enlightenment. There is a response happening. Maybe after another 20 years, the personality of Lisa will be more balanced and will be less snappy, but it's not really that snappy now. But like, if you ask Paul, it's quite an even personality, but maybe in another 20 years, snapping wouldn't come out. Like, I do think that the body then goes through a process of becoming more and more balanced. So you never know. But it's not like I look at myself as enlightened or anything. There is just what's happening. So I don't look and think this is acceptable or this isn't. There's just an energy that bursts out that's like ba 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 ba.
And that's not you.
It's the happening. It's like one thing and then another thing. And if I was with other people, I'd miserably be more snappy, to be honest with you. Paul's a really cool character to be with. But there's some characters that demand constant attention, and I would tell them very quickly to stop. If I was living in a very tight space with a character that was demanding, I would tell them very directly, very quickly. With Paul, Paul got very little snapping, also because his energy was very pure in a way. Like, he wasn't needy and he wasn't always trying to get me to be different things. There was a little bit, but not very much. Whereas some energies are so time-consuming and needy and wanting attention.
Okay, I think the talk before the last, you were talking about relationships, and you said in your personal experience, like you can't have a life partner when you're awakening who's not awakening. Is that true?
I think that sometimes, I think that life sometimes puts people that are waking up with, like,
normal people.
Not people that are waking up. So somebody that's like waking up or being on this path, it sometimes gets put with somebody that is already popped, and it's like a process that's happening. But I think in general, if somebody's really heavily identified, it's going to be very hard, because say if I'm around somebody that's suffering a lot, why would I stay with them?
Because you love them, probably. I mean, normal human way. Romeo and Juliet.
But I don't. I just respond to what's ever happening in the moment. Love is. And so if they're constantly presenting darkness, then my body's going to go away from them. My body will most probably go back to them to talk about non-duality. But why would my body want to stay around constant darkness? Because somebody that's in darkness is always going to be projecting stuff onto you and always going to be trying to get you to identify. My body would move away from those cages quite quickly. We'd have thought. But sometimes it's we have to do situations like we're in the aeroplane, or there's lots of different situations which makes you be with people that are very heavily identified, and then that's what happens, and there can't be a moving away from them.
How do we identify people who are sort of identified? It's very simple, is it?
It gets less simple. People that are awakening, and like when they're awakening, it's more complicated to tell if they're still awakening and there's still lots of change happening and not. But I can see very quickly when somebody's heavily identified. Like
What would be the symptoms of illness?
They would moan a lot. They would look negatively on life. Their face. And energetically, you can just tell. But when somebody's awakening, that's more confusing. Because they can be so open and expansive and then close, and that's more, I mean, when they're awakening, it's confusing. You can't really tell. But when they're heavily identified, there can be a recognition. But their face is like... their face is unhappy. You can just see it, but I'm very sensitive, so maybe it's not something that everyone can see.
And you were saying in the recent talks, like I think the talk before this, this sense of separation happened about 1.5 to 2 years when a child is 1.5 to 2 years, when the words or the language was formed.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's what my sense is. Yeah.
Many people say, and you're sort of formed on to that, and which means that the sounds which the baby produced and which the baby heard from the parents became Papa, Mama, I, so and so, and then they started to form into a software.
Yeah.
And that the verbal cage was created.
Yeah, it's so cute. My friend's child at the moment, he can only speak about himself in the third person. He's about 1 year and 8 months old, and his name's Charlie. He's like, Charlie said no. Charlie would like to go on the sofa. So I don't think that it's totally the energetic. I think it's beginning, but I don't think it's actually happened. Like, I think he still can't identify with Charlie, but he can't speak about himself as himself. He says, Charlie wants this, Charlie does this. It's really cute.
So this self, this me was created with the parents and the society telling the child, you are separate, sort of, right? That's what you said. You said language and words created this false sense of me.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Correct. Now the antidote to this false sense of me is actually silence then, ultimately, which can decontaminate this verbal cage we have built around ourselves. I am Ilangho, I am so and so.
Yes, go and live in the forest.
Huh?
Go and live in the forest.
Go and live in the forest.
I know, I'm joking, I'm joking. But yes,
I
mean, then that's a very famous Buddhist story, isn't it? One that I always tell you about. The Buddha said to Ilangho,
Lisa says to Ilangho. Buddha
Lisa
said
says
to
whatever his name was. It's not me. I'm perfectly still. It's you that's moving too fast. Yes, it's silence. It's stillness. But that silence and stillness is here. But yeah, a wise thing would be to take some time away from humanity. But your mind might go crazy at first, and you might run out of the forest in fear. Your mind might be like...
Oh no, the human being is now an urban jungle, concrete jungle.
Yeah.
So learn to live in the jungle with the silence inside you.
Whichever one. It's not you that's got to learn it, but whichever one. But also living in the forest, taking a break from living in the city would be incredibly healthy for the body. But I reckon most people's minds would go so insane because they're so used to stimulation. They would sit there and not know what to do with themselves. I did
How was
this.
your experience in Australia, where you were sort of in the jungle,
Forest,
right? Sort of.
Forest. Well, they actually called it bush in Australia. I lived in the bush.
Over 2-3 years.
Yeah, and at first what happened...
What is a bush? What is a bush?
A bush is a forest. There
is no land around. There is no civilization around. There are no neighbors.
There was neighbors, but not very many. But part of the forest land went for thousands of kilometers. We backed onto a park, a bush park, forest park. But at first, when I first went to live there, my mind began to fixate on how annoying Roger was. That's what began to...
How closest was the nearest town?
How close? Oh, not that far, actually, because where I lived in Perth, outside of Perth, it's the most remote city in the whole world. So when you drive out of the city, there's nothing. So we were only like an hour's drive from Perth, the city, but you just drive out from it and then it just goes into nothingness.
Okay,
We're not used to that in India or the Europe. It's so, I mean, the most remote city in the world, it kind of explains it.
You were telling me you used to get annoyed with Roger.
Yes, I used to fixate on how annoying he was at first. Then I would fixate on how annoying the environment was. This was first. And then after I'd say about 6 months, I began to see without a doubt that it was all the craziness of Lisa, which is huge. That's a huge thing, because even though most people have been told that, they don't believe it. They still believe it's their environment. But then when you actually go to, and you wipe out everything, and you just live in a forest with 2 dogs and Roger, you really, really begin to see that your mind is insane. Insane. And it will never, ever be happy, the mind. The separate self will never be happy. So it took about 6 months before I totally surrendered to that. But I mean, I tried. I blamed the environment, I blamed the birds, I blamed the hot tub, I blamed the garden, I blamed Roger. And there wasn't always blaming them, but I tried to blame the environment. I blamed being there, I blamed all these different things. And then after about 6 months, I 100% saw that it was just the craziness of my Lisa's mind. It was craziness of Lisa. And that no matter what she got, she would never be fulfilled. But this was like one of those seeings where it's not intellectual, it's known without a doubt. And that's huge. Most people that I speak to in non-duality, not like there's loads of them that aren't like this, but most people, they still believe that there's still something in the world that can make it better. To get to that point where you see there's nothing which will satisfy that craziness. That craziness is...
What was the insanity?
Sorry?
What was the insanity that you realized for those 6 months, and how did you overcome that insanity as a person before Bali?
What did I'd done many years of seeking, so I knew intellectually that it was the way in which I saw the world that was the problem. I knew I was the problem intellectually, but then that was like an energetic realization. It was like it was so clear, because normally we realize it energetically, but then we still believe that it's something in the world that's it. Yeah?
How did the intellectual understanding transform into an energetic realization? It was automatic?
It just happened. It's like the flow of thing presents it. It stripped me of everything that I knew. At that point, I was a successful writer. I wasn't that successful, but I was successful within my, what's it called? Peers, within my craft. Like theatre writing isn't a very good big industry, but I was successful in that industry. And I gave that up. I gave living in London. I gave my house up in London. I gave my job up. I gave everything up. I had such a cushy life in London. I gave my car up. I had a Mercedes.
Why?
Huh?
Why? So many things you gave up. Why?
Because I thought that this would lead me to freedom.
Australia?
Not exactly like that, but I was following freedom. I was trying to end my suffering, and I was fascinated by the way Roger spoke and by the way Ramesh spoke, and I couldn't turn my back on it. And to go back to my life in London, I had to turn my back on it.
Was it because, I don't know whether if I remember right, whether you spoke or I picked out from Ramesh or Roger's talks or books, or that Ramesh told you Roger's the right guy to guide you, probably.
Yeah.
Some sort of a beacon. And then you thought...
No. He didn't tell me that until after I'd given everything up. That was 6 or 7 months afterwards.
Ramesh or Roger?
Ramesh didn't tell me that in the beginning. Ramesh told me that after I'd already been living with Roger for about 8 months. This was like the 4th or 5th time I went to see him, and he said to me, "Just listen to Roger," and I was like, "Oh, come on," because as a partner, I found Roger really annoying. Like, Roger could be really beautiful, but he can also be really super annoying. If you've ever listened to his talks.
So you felt Roger as a teacher would probably lead you to freedom.
No,
At that point,
it wasn't quite like that. It wasn't quite like
no,
that.
you left a lot of things, your professional career, your
Yeah.
peer group, thing, your Mercedes, London, blah blah blah, to go and live in a bush with
Yeah,
somebody
but I never.
who's a scripted teacher, who's a recognized, probably documented
No, he
scripted
wasn't.
teacher.
He'd never. I was just. He'd never. He wasn't in any way. I just met him. I just met him in India. He wasn't. He used to teach to the neighbours there, but nobody knew of Roger. And I was never sure, even to this day, whether he was a psychopath or an enlightened person. I was never sure. I was like, but what happened when I was with him was he would annoy me so much that all my issues would be presented. And I was so fascinated by that burning. Like, Roger would take on nothing. So I would be walking along with him and he'd be pointing out all my issues and I'd be like, what about your issues? Look at you, you're not perfect. And he would just laugh. He would never ever get involved with me telling him about his issues. So what would happen was all the crap of Lisa would show, because I would want Roger to feel bad about himself. It was like he was pointing out my issues, so I'd be like, okay, let's make you feel bad about yourself. And he would never feel bad about him. Or if he did, he never showed it. He never gave in. He never, and that giving in, I wasn't ever sure if it was enlightened or he was just so determined to be right. I wasn't ever positive. And then it was like everything of Lisa came out. And I knew that's what had to happen, that all my gunk had to come out. So this was my attraction to Roger more than anything. I don't...
So this guy was actually removing a trash into the recycle bin.
Sorry?
He was removing the trash.
I don't know. All I knew that when I was with him, I couldn't hide. He would I just became, it was like, I loved the way that we spoke and I loved our conversations. Like when I first moved there, we would speak for 8 or 9 hours a day, but he also drove me insane. He drove me, but I was so willing to be insane. This takes such courage, because I was so willing to go crazy. Everybody else is wanting non-duality, but they want to maintain sanity. I was so willing to go absolutely crazy, but the beautiful thing about Roger was he didn't turn his back on my craziness. I would go crazy and he'd be like, nature of the mind. And I would just be like not necessarily at him, but I was just so honest about everything. I would be like, I feel this, I feel that, I was just willing to totally expose myself. Most people want to keep their life running. They want to keep their job. They want to keep their money. They want to keep their sanity, or they want to keep their social persona. I was just totally at that point of fuck it. And so with Roger, we went through this process, and then and that went on, and it just got less and less intense over the 3 years. But I would do it by myself as well. I would just go into the room and I would just completely be honest as to what I was in every moment. I'd be like, Roger, I want to kill you. You're so annoying. And I would say it, whereas most people, they would never say that. They would try and make Roger out to be wrong, or they would never admit their feelings, because if they admit their feelings, they lose the game. And in a way, I think this really balanced Lisa's personality.
Was he doing a sort of a psychoanalysis?
Who, Roger? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was doing. He would just point out all my issues.
So it was spiritual seeking which drew, made you leave your,
Yeah.
London.
What I liked about Roger was that I liked the way he spoke, and I liked the way that he was like a pit bull with my issues. And whether or not that was him deflecting his issues and projecting them on me, what it did was it made all my issues so obvious. Like, it just brought everything up. I was like, bleh. And I liked that. I liked it. I could feel in that, I could feel the sense in it. Even though to everyone else it must have looked like I was crazy, I could feel the sense in it that there was nothing to be ashamed of what insanities Lisa was.
But that's what this civilized world is doing, putting a cloak of sanity calling it civilization.
Yeah. And I just
It's
wasn't,
not the case.
and it wasn't me personally, but the energy did it. I was just so determined to step into the fire. I noticed by not speaking about my apparent process that people look at me and they think it was easy and that they think they can maintain their lives and get this. And it's not. Everything has to be, everything that you think you need has to be let go of. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to disappear. But, you know, I was so successful as a writer. I'd won so many awards, and I gave up for 10 years. I was so close to doing great things with writing, and I was like, pfft. Like it really, I wrote something again, but there's not really the intention. That was more because of Paul than came recently. But I was prepared to be totally naked.
So can I say then that your search for freedom was the one which drove you across the continent to meet Ramesh in Mumbai, and then go to Perth to be?
Yeah.
I mean, that was your search for freedom ultimately.
Yeah.
It was energetic.
And it was so strong. It was so strong. I was, you know, at 21, I was willing to sit 10 hours in meditation. At 21, when all my friends were getting drunk and doing all these things, I was willing to spend 10 hours meditating. You know, it was such a strong desire in this body. I was determined to give up everything for it. Anything. I would have killed myself for it.
What was your target as a seeker?
Originally it was for enlightenment, but then towards the end it was just to be happy. I was like, okay, I'll take happiness. I'll just take a more balanced personality. But originally it was enlightenment.
So what was enlightenment to Lisa 14 years ago when she was sitting down in meditation?
Enlightenment was like walking through walls, being telepathic, shining light, originally, when I first got into the subject. And then eventually I was like, I was happy to just become a more balanced version of myself, like a version of Lisa, more balanced. And that was that was eventually my game. And then I was like, if non-duality happens, or if that happens, then that's beautiful. But I'm happy to just go with a balanced Lisa. That was like, I was happy to go with a booby prize.
Then it becomes like you become hedonistic, like we become hedonistic.
No, no, I saw happy with being Lisa. I didn't see it as being hedonistic. I saw it as just like releasing my shit and becoming a more conditioned, better Lisa. That's how I saw it. I didn't see it as materialistic or getting things. I never saw it as that. I saw happiness as becoming a less neurotic version of Lisa. That's what I saw happiness as. I didn't see happiness as getting money or any of those things.
Then, like what the Buddha said, happiness is equal to lack of suffering.
Yeah, but I didn't mean it like the Buddha meant. I meant as in like, if I still have a bit of shit coming up, that's okay. But if I get more even, then I'm happy. Just to be a more even personality and separate self. Yeah, but I still listen to non-duality, and I still would be like, I will happily take non-duality, but I'm also happy to take just a balanced Lisa. Like a more balanced, and with Roger, I became very balanced, like a lot more balanced as a personality.
But this balance is what the Buddha told 2000 years ago, to be in the middle part. When I meant hedonism, I meant it like that. I didn't mean like party, you know, like alcohol, blah blah blah. So I don't know. You're going to go down.
I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know what the Buddha meant by middle path. So I can't agree or disagree. Like I think that's a very complicated thing to just explain in a few sentences. But yeah, just become more balanced. Like I wasn't out drinking and partying. I was looking after my body. I was exercising. I was living in the countryside. I was working on my issues with my family and my brother and all those sorts of things. And I still loved non-duality, and I was still resonating and buzzing like crazy with non-duality. But I didn't have that as a goal anymore.
Did your friend circle start slowly evaporating?
Yeah, I lost everything. Who wants to be friends with a woman that doesn't want kids and doesn't want to get married? All my friends are in the kids and getting married. And who thinks that is absolute? I mean, if I'm honest, like marriage, I think is like a retarded idea. Who wants to be friends?
Why are you against marriage? I am not for marriage. I'm asking you, why are you against marriage?
Because, well, in the West, the idea is that you're married for life. and that you commit
Yeah.
to someone for life. And I just think that's really
Yeah.
strange. If you got married and it was like, I commit to you for this moment with all my heart, I think that's beautiful. But you're committing for the next 50 years of life. I think that's really crazy.
Yes.
And then also we have this whole tradition of you give the woman away to a man. And I'm not really,
Yeah.
I don't really understand that side of it either. But if the marriage was, I commit to you with all my love for now, then I would be into it. But that's
But
normally
there's no
not what it's
guarantee.
like. Huh?
That's not a guarantee next. But that's not the guarantee for the next day, for the next week, or for the next month, year,
I
or
think
decade.
when you start saying for
Now
the next 50 years, it's based on fear and it's based on engaging each other. I don't think that's beautiful. I think that comes from fear and lack.
In the non-duality circles in India, who are into the old, the orthodox teaching of, this Indian spiritual Ramana Maharishi sort of, they say, in spirituality, as you develop in spirituality, you're supposed to go and mingle with everybody, and like for example, for me, literally, I'm not able to talk to my friends unless they come onto this wavelength. I've lost all my friends.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And they say, like, what's happening to you? I mean, why are you not coming and talking to us and things like that?
Yeah.
What is your advice on that?
I think it's quite natural.
That's okay.
Yeah, I think it's really natural.
Non-duality is okay.
Huh?
In non-duality, that's okay?
Yeah, there isn't really a process to it, but I think it's really natural that we normally have friends that validate where we are. And if that's not happening, then the friendship's going to fall away. Part of friendship is validating each other. It's totally the you don't get to take anyone with you. It's the Lone Ranger. Da 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 da. Yeah, you don't get to take anyone.
Lone Ranger.
Yeah.
Walking through the sunset. Is
Yeah.
it? Huh? How is it to be alone? How is it to be alone?
Well, eventually then it all disappears and then there's everything and you're not alone at all. But but when you think that you're somebody going through a process, then it is to be the Lone Ranger.
How do you advise a seeker, like when they come on to sort of a crossroad every day of their life where you're part of society, you're part of being a soldier for society, and then as this freedom starts enveloping you, you know that you're taking this, putting all your bucks onto the one square, like a Las Vegas casino gambler.
Yeah.
Everything may go haywire the next day. You may lose everything.
Yeah.
But still, this is saving you.
It's beautiful.
So when fear comes, stay with the fear.
The wise thing to do is always go back to the emotion rather than the story that's playing on top. The emotion that's under. So when you're in your social situation and you feel like you might be losing everything, then you just go, rather than staying on the stories of, I'm going to lose everything, this is bad, what am I doing, this is stupid, just go back to the sensation of fear. And just sit it out until that fear passes. And then when that fear passes, you won't any longer be scared of what's happening. It will be what it is. There's never any truth in anything you feel, but it keeps saying, this is the truth, this is the truth.
Is there a talk this Wednesday and Sunday, coming Sunday?
Yes. Yep. On Wednesday.
Next Sunday also.
And next Sunday as well. Yeah. And then I'm off to Ibiza for a week, I think. So then there's no talks. But yeah, for this next 2 months, I'm here pretty much most of the time. Just this Ibiza break. But I said I would answer Andrea's question as well, so I will leave you now.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Oh, with pleasure, Ilangho. Bye.
Bye.
Even though my story is an illusion now, like all there is this, there's a bit more of talking about it because after years of teaching now and speaking with people, I see that people are always getting stuck in certain places. They listen to me and they think, oh, nothing needs to change, or so it's always got to be a changing teaching, really. So if you get comfortable with the way I'm speaking, I've got to change it again, because there is nowhere to rest. There's no idea that can be truth. Even know me. If people start coming to me and repeating know me too much, then I'm gonna, oh, well, there is a me or something. Don't know if I'll say it like that, but there's nowhere to sit and rest in this. I suppose this is why a live speaker is really good to go to, because in a book it will always be one way. You can't change it, but the live speaker can keep changing to whatever keeps coming back to them. And now, after a certain amount of years speaking, what I see is that people are taking this to stay in their story. They're saying there is no me, so I can't help it, so it's got to be like this, or blah 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 blah. They use it to validate their own apathy. But the most important bit beyond the intellect is the love, like the tasting of that love, because that's who you truly are. And it's not your love, it's not about you, it is everything. Life is love. It's just you see it as subject object, and then it's fear and safety, beauty and ugliness, me and you, right and wrong. But when that's not there, then it's just love, total unconditioned love. And Andrea doesn't seem to be picking up. She fell asleep while me and Ilangho were speaking. I'm sure that was because of Ilangho, not because of Lisa. I'm really joking. I think I did most of the talking. Okay, guys, I love you. Bye.